You have to forgive me if I'm a little off during this review. I'm a little sick. That said, thank you for working with me onto your screens or onto your headphones, depending on how you're watching this. I'm Eddie, and this is the Rollback. Folks, I'm here to talk to you today about The Exorcist, aka that movie your parents told you not to watch when you were a kid, but compared to today's films, it's not as scary as, everyone thinks it is. Shit, that's a long one. So, The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin, starring Ellen Burst. This movie is complicated, to say the least. I don't know what I can really say that's original compared to other people. There's so many that have done better reviews of this. Look up Matt Draper in his review of The Exorcist. He looks at it from a different perspective, not from horror, but from science, and from a mother's perspective, and the questions of faith. The Exorcist is, simply put, a horror film, more complicated, a film about faith. Let me dive a little deeper into that. So the film story that we all know, a little girl by the name of Reagan becomes possessed by a demon, while a priest who's having a crisis of faith goes to perform an exorcist along with another priest that faced this demon once before. I believe the demon's Azuzu, if I'm not mistaken. That said, this film, its legacy is noted. Again, there's not much I can tell you that you don't already know. People passed out when the film first came out. On the scenes drama, this movie's cursed by the amount of death that surrounded this film, fires that happened, injuries that happened, William Friedkin being a notoriously, there's no other way to say it, dickish director, injuring several people, firing guns on set just before takes, just to see what would happen. The whole cold breath thing. Yeah, they were in an actual meat-locked freezer during shooting that scene. They would shoot for only minutes at a time before it would get, the air would stop becoming cold, and then they had to fucking reset. Let alone this poor little girl that's trying to act as best she can, but she's also freezing cold. That all said, this film, I think, gets a bad rap because it's just considered a scary film. When, if you look underneath it, you see a lot more. There's so many more layers than simply movie scary, girl creepy. There's more to it than that. This film is about faith, and what do you do when you have a crisis of faith? What do you do when the God that you believe in, you begin to question, is he even real, or is he even benevolent in the first place? What kind of God would allow a little girl to be possessed? In addition to that, questions of parenthood, this mother taking on insurmountable odds to try and help her daughter. She tries everything she can, medically speaking, to help her daughter, and yet nothing is working. These people, the pinnacle of the medical community, cannot figure out what the hell is wrong with Reagan. Whereas sometimes you just have to go with faith. Sometimes you have to go with God. But even in that, what kind of God will allow this little girl to be possessed? And going forward with that, we also have to talk about guilt. Father Damien. Damien. I was correct the first time. Father Damien. Part of his guilt is the fact that he can't afford to take care of his mother properly. She dies in the hospital wailing. His guilt of not being able to do enough for her, which I think is something most of us would feel, especially if we had a good mother that actually took good care of us. In addition to that, this gives us two characterizations of priests that, frankly, are underrated because we've never really had priests that go along this way. It's also interesting to note, though, that as the film goes on, Father Damien and his belief in God only seemingly get more reinvigorated as time goes on, eventually sacrificing himself to get the demon out of Reagan. He, once he's possessed, instead of giving the demon a chance to kill or hurt anyone, jumps out a window sacrificing himself, and then allows his good friend to give him his last rites. This movie is complicated and has a very complicated history, but fundamentally this movie, you could argue, is the first true scary horror demon possession film. I know that's very niche, but bear with me on this. How many knockoffs have we had? How many tributes have we had? How many films have attempted to, if not copy this outright, attempted to homage the film? Movies that, frankly, I love, like The Conjuring, The Exorcism of Emily Rose. We have The Last Rites, The Fear. We have The Last Exorcism. Several films, from comedies to mockumentaries to documentaries, all talking about this one crisis of faith, and also this overwhelming power of a demon to possess someone that is frankly too innocent to be injured. What do you do in this situation? This is a movie that inspired an entire genre, which, onto itself, it's been voted the scariest film ever made several times. Now, if you look at it from today's modern lens, is this film really that scary? Maybe yes and no. There's no doubt that there's certain visuals in this film that stand the test of time that are still scary. That said, though, when you stack it up with films like The Conjuring, when you stack it up against certain films like, again, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, other modern hits that, yes, did take from this formula, does it still stand the test of time? That's not really for me to say. I can say from my own perspective, when I saw the film, I was still, freaked out a good amount, but is it the film that scared me the most? No. But then again, maybe it's not meant to be. This movie is not just meant to be scary, it's meant to elicit a conversation rather than it simply being terrifying for being terrifying's sake. A movie that genuinely scared me was Halloween, the new one from 2018. Also the original, I suppose. Because to me, the idea of possession is something so far out of reach, I don't even consider it a threat. Whereas the thought of a hulking 7-foot, 300-pound monster beating the shit out of me, that's terrifying. That's also more realistic. So, I guess it goes to, what do you find scary? What do you find terrible? What do you find terrifying? This movie, it almost feels redundant to give it a grade at this point. Would I give it an A? Yes. Is it considered one of the scariest films of all time? Yes. Do I recommend that everyone should watch it at least once? Yes. This is a legitimate piece of cinema history. Just as much so as The Godfather or the Star Wars trilogy. The original trilogy. The new trilogy is fine. The prequels are fine. So yeah, this movie is just as much a piece of history as The Godfather or the original Star Wars trilogy. It's a piece of cinema history that you should watch. There's a reason why this film was selected to be preserved in Congress, after all. This movie, it feels redundant to give it a grade, but I'd give it an A. But what do you think? Go ahead and comment down below. We'd greatly appreciate it. And are you looking forward to The Exorcist Believer? Let us know in the comments down below. That said, we'll catch y'all next time. See you, everyone.